Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Around the World in 80 Events, #The Conversation. And today I'm joined by Doug McLean from Edmonton, Canada. Hello, Doug. How are you?
Hello, Matt. How are you?
Yes, very well, thank you. Let's just get cracking and straight in. And if you just want to tell me who you are and what organisation you are part of.
Yeah, for sure. So, Doug McLean. I'm the director of Edmonton Events. We're the sport and cultural event attraction arm of Edmonton Tourism here in the province of Alberta in Western Canada. So for anyone tuning in from around the world, we're about a 4-hour drive east of the Rocky Mountains, if you're trying to give a perspective, and about an hour and a half flight east of Vancouver. So just to give perspective on where we are, a city of about 1.5 million people in the middle of the Western Canadian prairies, and definitely proud of our sport hosting culture here in the city. And we have a great team that does our best to bring lots of great events here to the city.
So what was your year going to look like this year with the events you had planned?
Yeah, we had actually a fairly busy year coming up, both on the international and the national side. There's a massive Canadian Youth Volleyball Championship event that we've held before, and we were going to hold here again, actually coming up in about a couple weeks' time in mid-May. And a massive event brings about 10,000 athletes to the city, families, friends, etc. I'm trying to remember exactly off the top of my head, about 900, 1,000 teams. So it's a huge event, which unfortunately we were not able to do. We have the ITU Grand Final and Triathlon was scheduled to be here in August. That's now changed, and they're looking at other options for that. We still have on the schedule the World Junior Ice Hockey Championships coming up in December and early January. So all crossing our fingers that that'll hold on. There was an earlier event. We had the Hlinka Gretzky Cup, which is a international hockey tournament that brings together players a little before their National Hockey League draft age. So we held that one back a couple of years ago, and it's a partnership between us and the Czech and Slovak Ice Hockey, not us at Edmonton, sorry, Hockey Canada and the Czech and Slovak Ice Hockey Federations. That was supposed to be here in August. That one, of course, with all the travel situations and borders closed out, was almost impossible. So we'll have that one here again in 2022. So yeah, just to give you a bit of sense, and some other national events that we had on the amateur and youth sides that just, again, can't happen. So it was definitely going to be a really good year for us. So we're hoping a lot of these things will carry over into 2021 where possible. But like everybody, we're just kind of waiting to see what might be possible.
So let's just go into one thing that I know you are part of, which is the element of attracting the events. What do you think the change will be for the future in regards to attracting international events to Edmonton?
I think the international piece, it's going to be really interesting to see how their own calendars start to change. I mean, the one thing that we've seen, and again, I know we're not the only one, is that a change to one piece in a calendar by one event has a cascading effect on other events down the road. So we've seen that even with a couple of our events that aren't even this year, that are being affected by changes and things that are happening now that are going to maybe push them further down the road. I know from our standpoint, our focus, at least for the time being, will likely, though we'll continue to look at the possibility of international events, but our focus will probably be a little more on the national side for the next little while, I think, for a couple of reasons. One, I think that travel piece will be a lot easier, and the ability for people to move around. I think as well, even from an economic impact standpoint, those national events often bring significant returns for the investment we have. And like everyone, I mean, we're facing funding challenges too. And so from the international side of things, and events that are, obviously have great image and reputation benefits and can bring a lot to your city, come often, depending, with a decent price tag to them. I think cities are going to be, I don't know if reluctance the word, I think they're going to think a little differently about those in terms of where it goes. And it might take a bit of a meeting of the minds on the international rights holder side and the cities to come together in terms of how you make that work, because funding is going to be a challenge for cities. And again, that movement of people is going to be challenging, and when those borders will open up and travel will be more accessible. So it's going to be, I think it'll be interesting for international events. But again, someone's going to have to take a leap somewhere. And I think once events start happening, which may not be until 2021, I think that'll start to give people a bit of a comfort as far as how this can work and how people can move. And then cities will again start to think about, hey, I want to actually bring some of those back to my city.
We've kind of touched on it, but how do you think this is going to change that image as such of a place?
There's going to be a desire for people to start to move about and want to get out. And again, it may take a while for them to do that, but they'll want to start to move. And so I think as much as that security, health, safety piece is going to be important, I think people are just going to expect that. And the messaging that's going to come and start to rise above is escape. It's, I want to get out. I want to see places. I want to be careful, but I that's going to be just part of the general thinking now. So I think the image reputation piece may be a little quiet for a while in terms of how people leverage events, but I don't think it's going to go away. I think it might, again, that might be another couple of years down the road where people start to think about how they can leverage things like events to further support those goals of driving visitation back.
So that point you just said there, we'll just pick up on something you said there about consumers coming back into, wanting that need for events. But over the last 2 months, we've now all been told, to stay 2 meters away from someone. There's that whole psychological pushback. Do you think that events will actually want to come back when they have to think about buying it, getting consumers to buy in, which is its own task, never mind actually setting up just the event operations?
It's one thing to think about the measures. When you actually go and cost them out, map out the logistics of pulling these things together. And I was saying to a colleague yesterday, I said, related to this one list that I'd seen, there were about 18 different points on it. And I'm like, yeah, these all make sense for a period of time.
Yeah.
But the reality, the logistics around this are just not going to make them feasible to become embedded, in my mind, for a long time. And so I think your point is bang on, because I think the cost to actually deliver events, and depending on the type of event, if you're talking about a spectator-driven one, the cost to deliver versus a physically distanced or a limited capacity situation, the numbers just won't add up. Like, it's not going to be viable for you to be trying to figure out how to have, okay, I've got whatever, I'll use hockey again. I've got a hockey event coming in. I have to hand masks out to everybody. Okay, well, there's a cost to that. How do I logistically do that? Okay, I've got to have people coming into my venue. So how do I keep them 2 meters apart? Do I need extra staff to navigate? I mean, the costs are going to be astronomical. So I think you're right. There will be some events, I think, that will be feasible because the other side on the revenue piece will work. And so I think in our case about the National Hockey League, I think about the Premier League or major football leagues around the world that'll have the dollars and the capacity to make that work. But when I think about a lot of the events that we have coming in from the youth amateur side of things, I mean, these are national sport organizations that are struggling themselves right now. I mean, they've lost a lot of revenue through all of this too. I don't know how they're going to be in a position to meet that level of criteria to actually stage the event. So I think it's a huge question you bring up there that I think hasn't really come to the fore quite yet. I'm reading a little more about it in the last week, but I think those things have to line up. That safety health piece has to line up with the actual sheer cost. And I don't know right now that it makes it overly viable, but we'll see. I mean, that may change a bit over the course of time as well.
What do you think the 3 biggest challenges for your year coming, and maybe even the next 5 years due to this health pandemic will be?
Funding is going to be a huge one for sure, I think, for us. I think what the question you just brought up, I think that and I'll call it the ability to host, and it's not so much that we don't have the ability to host, but coming back to that whole venue piece, can we put situations and put groups in a position where they feel comfortable and at a reasonable cost that they can deliver their event. So I think that's going to be something that's going to be a bit of a challenge for sure. I think we'll get a little more comfortable with where, with what we can do and what we're okay with. And so that may ease some of those. So that may be a shorter term concern than a longer term one. And then I think a third one probably for us is, what is the overall impact on sport in general? Like, what is the impact on, in our case, the provincial and national sport organizations? What, are they going to be in a position to deliver the kinds of events that they have historically? Is that going to have to change in terms of, maybe they can't do all the ones they've done, they have to pare them back. On the international side, I think that the shifting calendar and the moving about of things is going to have an impact on them too. And we think about the international organizations as these big, massive conglomerates, and some of them are for sure, but a lot of them are, they're not flush with dollars either. So it's, you think about how they're going to be able to deliver events and get people convinced to move around.
That was the challenges. So what do you think the opportunities moving forward in the next 3 to 5 years, 1 to 3 to 5 years will be from this?
And maybe it does create the opportunity for a little more partnership and longer term view in terms of how cities and rights holders come together in terms of, because cash may not be as present on either side at the moment. So how do you still find ways to host events and bring them together? I think that's one thing. I think one thing that we've talked about even before COVID-19 came into our mindset was around how do we look at not necessarily joint bid, but working together with other cities within our geographical region to to bring events that we may share over the course of a couple of years. And the other thing too that I've thought about a little bit is it possible for cities to start, and I'll use the term owning events, that may not be the right way to phrase it, but having to think through all these different logistics. If they're able to get set up and operate an event in a venue, are they going to want to go and figure out how to do that in 4 others over the course of the next few years? Or are they going to gain comfort with a certain venue and want to stay there for a bit and anchor down? So is there an opportunity there for cities to leverage the assets they have, the people they have, the sport expertise, the venues, to look at specific events that they may be able to say, hey, can we get together for the next few years, create a bit of comfort on both sides, and again, start to own some of those events for a period of time that might have historically moved around.
I think that's another thing that's not been spoken about yet, is that in that depth is the end of touring events, like moving every 2 years. Is there an end, and actually is there a market for actually arguing that bidding for events is no longer going to be a thing? It kind of was already, the Olympics was already kind of rustling out because 2028, that's booked up to them. So it's very interesting to get your perspective on that. So just to go back to sport very quickly, do you think that sport going virtual has the same impact on consumers currently? And do you think in 2 years' time you're going to see more esport events bidding to bring their tournaments and competitions to your city?
Yeah, I think it'll have an impact, and it might see a bit of a bump there. But I mean, the reality is that people want to compete. People that are involved in sport do it because they love the competition. They love the athletic side of it. They want that opportunity to compete against people from other parts of your country or the world. So I don't think that goes away. And I think our desire as spectators to want to be part of sporting events won't wane either. People will want to compete, and competition inherently means you're in the same space as somebody else. So that whole virtual thing is interesting. I think the esports piece, as I said, will have a bump, but in terms of it impacting other delivery of sport, I'd say we're probably fairly safe in the long run. And you can't have a volleyball tournament virtually. Like, you and I can't play tennis, and as much as it'd be great to do it between Scotland and Alberta, it's a little tricky to do. So
yeah, we would win. We've got Andy Murray.
Yeah, well, I'd be in trouble, but hey.
So looking into the 10 years time though, 5-10 years, just for talk's sake, looking at strategic direction, don't you think but that the sport consumer will have, yes, they will have changed, but do you not think that they'll be looking for more of a hybrid approach to sport? And actually that does have an impact on sporting events decisions for investment into cities.
There is the possibility that in some cases, in some sports, it may allow competition to still happen, and the athletic piece to still happen, but maybe a bit differently. Can you look at judged sports a little differently in terms of what you might be able to do? Can you have a figure skating competition as an example with good technology that allows you to film and live stream someone's competition, where they're doing that at their home rink 10 minutes from their house and competing against someone across the world, with judges able to watch and look? I heard about a swimming event that's going to do that a little bit, where they'll do regional competitions, take those times, then go back and compare those nationally. So it's a bit of a different way of looking at that in terms of how you aggregate those those times and compare them back to a national audience. I think those are things that may be part of it, but I'm not sure in 5 or 10 years, if you and I get on here again, that we're going to be talking about virtual figure skating competition. I'd be surprised, but I'm confident those kind of things are being talked about right now. So some things will change for sure, but I think if you and I join up again in a few years, it might be more on that funding piece. It might be more on that bidding piece, and how, like you said, how events move around. That might be where the changes come more than the actual event delivery itself.
That was an episode of Around the World in 80 Events, #The Conversation. Thank you so much to Doug McLean from Edmonton Events in Edmonton. I hope you enjoyed it, Doug. And his name is very Scottish. So you never know, we might be long lost cousins.
Exactly.
But thanks for everyone for tuning in, and check out this episode and more on the YouTube channel.